Do you remember that old mountain at the edge of Disneyland? The one just beyond New Orleans Square in the southern bayous of Critter Country? Water flowed all through it, taking logs up a watermill and into the mountain itself. There was something mighty satisfactual about the critters who lived in there. They was always asking, "How do you do?" And they couldn't open their mouths without a song coming right out. At the very top sat Chickapin Hill. Just remember, what goes up is sure to come down. And over those steep falls was that briar patch. It always seemed to be where you could look for a little more adventure. The weather was good, the fishing was fine. It was the kind of place you'd go to laugh. Whatever happened to it, you ask? Well, to know that, we've got to go way back. This tale didn't happen just yesterday, nor the day before, but long, long ago.
The story begins in 1862, when a young man by the name of Joel Chandler Harris was hired as a printing compositor for Joseph Addison Turner. Turner, the owner of Turnworld Plantation in Georgia, invited Harris to live on the property, where he encouraged the young author to be both creative and critical in his writing. During his time at Turnworld, Joel Chandler Harris often frequented the slave quarters, where he would be entertained by African American stories of animals, told by people such as George Terrell, Old Harbert, and Aunt Chrissy. It was these three who would inspire Harris's most famous character, Uncle Remus. After making a name for himself with his Affairs of Georgia column in the Morning News, by 1876, Harris quickly found himself filling in for an absent Samuel W. Small, a dialect writer with the Atlanta Constitution. It was here where Harris first introduced the public to Uncle Remus, who often dropped by the Constitution office to discuss social and racial issues of the time. The character was immediately controversial, something that would continue to be a reoccurring problem in the years to come. In an attempt to reach a broader audience, an article discussing Buh Rabbit and the Tar Baby, Harris read in Lippicot's On African American Folklore, inspired him to revisit his years at Turnworld, and soon Uncle Remus was telling stories of the trickster protagonist known only as Brier Rabbit. On July 20th, 1879, Harris published the story of Mr. Rabbit and Mr. Fox, as told by Uncle Remus. For the first time, it was possible to experience the adventures of Brier Rabbit firsthand. Newspapers across the United States were eager to reprint these successful stories, and Harris was writing them as fast as he could. Before long, Harris had written 34 fables, which he comprised in the book titled Uncle Remus, His Songs and His Sayings. During his lifetime, he would release 5 other collections of Uncle Remus stories, the most notable being Told by Uncle Remus, New Stories of the Old Plantation in 1905. Children everywhere adored the relatable Brier Rabbit and his clever ways. One of these children being Walter Elias Disney. Following the success of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in 1937, and after a few years of discussion with the Harris family, Walt joyously purchased the rights to all of the Uncle Remus characters in 1939 for $10,000, the equivalent to $180,000 today. Before the deal was complete, Walt was so excited that he had his team create 4 storyboards for the to-be animated film starring Brier Rabbit. I was familiar with the Uncle Remus tales since boyhood. From the time I began making animated features, I have had them definitely in my production plans, Walt said. The initial vision was to make the stories into a fully animated feature, but there was a problem. A union strike in 1941 led to half of the Disney art department walking out, putting the studio in financial troubles. Walt's brother, Roy Disney, eventually resolved the conflict, giving the workers almost everything they had asked for. And just as things seemed to fall back into place, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, plummeting America into the depths of the Second World War. 500 United States Army troops moved into the Walt Disney Studios, the only Hollywood film studio under military occupation in history. Walt was thrown into creating propaganda films such as De Fure's Face and Donald Gets Drafted. Throughout the duration of the war, the studio produced over 68 hours of educational war films, taking a severe toll on Walt, who was no longer gaining the creative satisfaction from his animations. In 1943, some of Walt's joy was returned in the making of Victory Through Air Power, based on the 1942 nonfiction book of aviation Walt had grown fond of. The film, however, was a flop. With little financial return from its government endeavors, a deprived Walt Disney needed a new plan. Live action mixed with animation. It wasn't an easy task, but given Walt's determination, the studio began pumping out hits such as Saludos Amigos and The Three Caballeros. In 1945, Walt Disney announced, "We're through with the caviar. From now on, it's mashed potatoes and gravy." It was time to get back to the storyboard. The initial full-length animated movie, titled Uncle Remus, was now to be a live-action film, which would include 3 animated segments. Brier Rabbit Runs Away, Brier Rabbit and the Tar Baby, and Brier Rabbit's Laughing Place. Roy Disney, being in charge of the studio's finances, did not feel this would be a strong enough film to bring in the profits needed. Walt, however, like he had always done before, stuck with his vision. With Bill Peet, Mark Davis, Claude Coates, Ollie Johnson, Eric Larson, Ken Anderson, and Ralph Wright, Walt had a team of lead artists who would soon bring the delightful characters to life. Mark Davis, Walt Disney's Renaissance man, said, Walt had been interested in getting into live action for some time. Here was a way he could do that and have his cartoon too. I think almost all the animators who worked on it would have to say they'd never done anything more fun than that film. The short length of the 3 segments was seen as an advantage to the artist, who could now spend more time on their animations without the budget restraints from that of a full-length animation. On May 10, 1944, the title was officially changed from Uncle Remus to Song of the South. Once animation was nearing the finishing stages, it came time to cast the live-action portion of the film. Actors such as Rex Ingram, Clarence Muse, and Paul Robeson were considered for the role of the wise old storyteller. However, none quite seemed to fit the part. Other auditions were taking place for the roles of the talking animals in the film. When one man by the name of James Baskett was auditioning for the role of a butterfly, his voice caught the attention of everyone in the studio. Walt knew he had found his Uncle Remus. Not only did Basket fill the role of Uncle Remus, he also was set to play the voices of Brier Fox, the butterfly he had initially auditioned for, and even filled in to voice Brier Rabbit in the Laughing Place scene. It is noted that Walt Disney told Basket's sister, Ruth, that James was the best actor, I believe, to be discovered in years. Song of the South now had an all-star cast, comprised of James Basket, Johnny Lee, Nick Stewart, Hattie McDaniel, Bobby Driscoll, and Ruth Warwick. The film premiered on November 12, 1946 in Atlanta, Georgia. Cold VIPs waited patiently in 40-degree weather outside of the doors of the Fox Movie Palace, and at 7:30 p.m., antebellum costumes, Southern souvenirs, and the serenade of the theater's organ player welcomed more than 5,000 invitees as they entered the lobby. Once everyone had taken their seats in the main theater, the show began, comprised of radio hosts, animators, Joel Chandler Harris Jr., and Walt Disney himself, who even greeted the audience in his Mickey Mouse voice with a
"How are y'all doing?"
Everybody was in attendance that night, except. Due to segregation laws in Atlanta at the time, none of the African American cast could attend the premiere, including the film's star, James Basket. As the final credits rolled, the audience erupted with cheer. Walt Disney, who had been nervously waiting in a hotel across the street, was finally able to breathe a sigh of relief. Atlanta Mayor William B. Hatsfield exclaimed that the film was an outstanding piece of work and immediately demanded Walt wire a congratulations to James Basket for his performance. Song of the South was a hit. In 1948, James Basket received an honorary Oscar with Walt's insistence, stating that Basket had worked almost wholly without direction. With such a strong performance, Basket became the first African-American male performer to receive an Academy Award. On July 9, 1948, James Basket passed away, at just 44 years old. Despite being a success, the film was not without its share of controversy. It was believed by many viewers that the African-American cast all represented slaves pre-Civil War, when slavery was still common in this region. Walt Disney himself came out and said the film takes place during the Reconstruction era, after slavery was abolished. This is where the issue lies. Though Walt and his team had good intentions, there wasn't a switch that magically flipped. Yes, African Americans could now own land, vote, and seek their own employment. They were, however, still treated poorly, and segregation was very much real, especially in the South. The film was criticized for romanticizing the plantation life in the 1860s, giving audiences the impression that the struggles African Americans faced were little to none. Over at Disneyland, new projects were taking place in Tomorrowland's Carousel Theater. The large crowds, which once packed in the Carousel of Progress, had been losing interest for some time now, and with General Electric, the sponsor of the attraction, asking Disney to move the show, it seemed there would be a great big beautiful tomorrow now waiting for John and the family at the Magic Kingdom. The Carousel of Progress officially closed on September 9, 1973. To celebrate the bicentennial, an exciting new attraction would debut on June 29, 1974. America Sings, featuring a cast of 115 audio-animatronic animals and hosted by Eagle Sam and Ollie Owl, would take the audience through 4 big acts honoring America's musical history. Going south, heading west, the the gay 90s, and modern times. The attraction gave use to old character designs by Mark Davis. Mother Possum, who was originally designed for Song of the South, now fittingly resided in the Deep South portion of the show, singing, "Lord, I wish I was a single girl again." Chanticleer, a would-be animation film based on the play by Edmund Rostand, was in development for almost 20 years before ultimately being shelved in the 1960s. Though the film never saw completion, Mark Davis had designed a handful of characters who could now have a home in America Sings. With music by Buddy Baker and a story written by Mark Davis and Albertino, Disneyland had a hot new attraction that would be loved by guests for the next 14 years. A whole new string of exciting attractions were opening across Disneyland, such as Space Mountain and the Starcade in 1977, and the ever-popular Big Thunder Mountain Railroad in 1979. The park seemed to be more exciting than ever, all except for one corner. Bear Country, snugged in the edge of Disneyland, had remained nearly unchanged since 1971, when the Country Bear Jamboree had first opened. Henry, Teddy Barra, Liverlips McGraw, and even Big Al were no longer enough to draw in the crowds as they once did. Some guests said it was a nice, quiet place to relax in the middle of the day. Others said it was indeed quiet. Perhaps a little too quiet. Bear Country needed an e-ticket attraction. With log flumes becoming more and more popular in theme parks across the country, guests almost expected one from Disneyland. Wanting one for some time, Chairman of Walt Disney Attractions, Dick Nunis, insisted a log flume be the next big attraction within the park. Imagineers resisted the idea, saying it would be too ordinary of a theme park attraction. Other parks have it. That's why we shouldn't. We're Disney and we're unique, they said. But then, what was to be put in Bear Country? Legendary Imagineer Tony Baxter, who was responsible for the successful Thunder Mountain Railroad and Journey into Imagination over in Epcot, was given the task of coming up with the new thrill ride. Rather than dismissing Nunis's idea, Baxter asked himself, how could we make this one different? In 1983, while on his way to the Imagineering studio in Glendale, Baxter found himself stuck in rush hour traffic. He began to remember an old film. It was here where history was made. A log flume attraction themed after Song of the South. When he arrived at his office, Tony Baxter gathered both Bruce Gordon and John Stone and began brainstorming. After several days, the trio came up with an attraction called the Zippity River Run, which would retell the story of Brer Rabbit Leaves Home. Bruce Gordon, the attraction producer, is quoted as saying,
"Once we had the biggest and best log ride, we decided to lay mythology on top of that. Go back to one of the best Disney has ever appropriated, the Joel Chandler Harris Uncle Remus characters. Brer Rabbit, Brer Bear, and Brer Fox from the 1946 classic Song of the South. The animation from this, the characters, the backgrounds, music is some of the best stuff we've ever done. We've never used this stuff in an attraction before. We decided, let's take all the characters from Song of the South and follow the adventures of Brer Rabbit."
And away they went. A model of the ride's exterior was built, and storyboards were soon created, depicting the various scenes the guests would go through. One idea was to use the Brier Patch scene as the show's big finale, replicating Brer Rabbit's escape from Brer Fox. Rather than using the Tar Baby, drawings were made depicting Brer Fox trapping Brer Rabbit in honey whilst in the laughing place. And the centerpiece of the mountain would be Chickapin Hill, the hollowed-out log in which Brer Fox uses to look for Brer Rabbit. On a Saturday morning, Disney CEO Michael Eisner and president of the Walt Disney Company Frank Wells came to Baxter's office to review concepts for the upcoming Star Wars attraction he had been working on. Also in attendance was Eisner's 14-year-old son Breck, who, for his love of theme parks, was brought along for his opinion. Baxter was doubtful Breck would like the Song of the South characters. Being that the film had come out 37 years earlier, Tony Baxter feared Breck wouldn't know who Brer Rabbit was, or, if he did, would not find him exciting, given the entertainment of the day. During the Star Wars presentation, Breck was vocal to his father about how much he loved the idea of actually jumping into lightspeed and fighting TIE fighters. While the three men were talking, Breck walked over to the corner of the room, and while staring at the model of the large mountain, asked, "What's this?" Nervous, Tony Baxter walked over and ran through the entirety of the ride, focusing mostly on the thrill aspects. To Baxter's surprise, Breck loved the project.
And we get done with the whole thing, and he goes, "Dad, that's even better than Star Wars." So he goes, "Okay, we're doing that."
Eisner and Wells were sold, and the project was given the green light. The only thing Eisner asked was that there not be an animatronic Uncle Remus. Just focus on the Brier characters, he said. Zippity River Run would be placed just past New Orleans Square at the entrance to Bear Country. Ground broke in April of 1987 with a budget of $75 million, one of Disney's most expensive projects at the time. The ride's exterior was first sculpted into a miniature, and then scanned into a computer wired to a rebar bending machine. The computer produced life-size section-by-section replicas of the model. After installation of the sections on site, concrete was sprayed, then shaped, and painted to look like clay and dirt that supposedly made up the mountain. It was coordinated to complement the colors of the nearby Thunder Mountain, and was to be the first ride based on an animated film built outside of Fantasyland. It was important the exterior matched the surrounding lands. The mountain would be so tall, the foundation would actually have to be sunk deep into the ground so to not overpower the neighboring attractions. A show building was constructed offstage to house both the How Do You Do and Laughing Place scenes. The rest of the ride, such as the drop and the famous Zippity-Doo-Dah finale, would all be located inside of the mountain itself. As time went on, Michael Eisner, who tried to gear the parks towards more thrill seekers, did not feel the name Zippity River Run would appeal to a teenage audience. With the surprising success of 1984's Splash, starring Tom Hanks and Daryl Hannah, Eisner decided the ride should be called Splash, even going so far as to wanting an animatronic mermaid incorporated into the show. Imagineers completely disagreed, saying a mermaid would totally disrupt the Song of the South theming. As a running joke around the studio, Imagineers often referred to the attraction as Splash Mountain. Over the course of development, the name stuck and ended up tying in beautifully with the surrounding mountains of Disneyland. A compromise was made. Eisner can keep the name, but leave the mermaid. A sign was soon placed outside of the construction walls which read, "Coming soon, Splash Mountain, the fastest, laughinest, splashinest log flume ever built, opening early 1989. In popular Disney fashion, a backstory was written explaining how the mountain came to be.
Legend has it that deep in the United States of Georgia live critters that walk and talk in the same manner as human folk. At the center of this magical land is Chickapin Hill, and it's here that the Beaver Brothers had built their sturdy new dam. But unbeknownst to them, Rackety Raccoon had also constructed a juice-producing still in the same area, and it seems that while Rackety was concocting a new experimental brew, he used a few too many blueberries with disastrous results. When his still exploded, It took the Beaver Brothers dam with it, and water began to rush downhill through many caves, burrows, holes, and tunnels that crisscrossed the mountain. From that moment on, the local critters started calling their home Splash Mountain, and the name stuck.
Inspired by a quote from Song of the South, in 1988, Bear Country was renamed to Critter Country.
The critters, they was closer to the folks, and the folks, they was closer to the critters. And if you'll excuse me for saying so, 'twas better all round.
Once the show buildings were ready, it was time to fill the attraction. Construction on the Brier characters was underway, and all that was left to do was create the many animatronic characters who would fill the remainder of the ride. But there was another problem. Money was running out. In an interview with Tony Baxter, he's noted as saying,
There was a big estimating disaster. The amount of rock work was misdiagnosed by half. The problem seemed to be that if a surface had a cave inside, the inside wasn't calculated, just the surface. If grass grew on top, they said it wasn't rock work, but they didn't budget for pans that had to be even stronger to hold dirt and the structure.
back in Tomorrowland, with the bicentennial now over, America Sings was struggling to keep its popularity. In a land dedicated to the future, an attraction which celebrated America's history began to feel out of place. And, with guests packing in to ride Space Mountain and the all-new Star Tours, the show was playing to half-empty theaters. Imagineers were beginning to source materials from the ride for other attractions, such as 2 animatronic geese who were stripped down and used as droids in the queue for Star Tours. Despite this, there were no official plans to close the Carousel Theater, and the show carried on. As Splash Mountain's opening date grew closer, and the lack of animatronic animals became a heavier burden, Baxter suddenly had a realization. Moving the AA figures from America Sings to Splash Mountain would be a perfect fit for the animatronics, as they were already themed appropriately. In turn, closing America Sings would free up the Carousel Theater for a new, more popular attraction in Tomorrowland. America Sings played its last show on April 9, 1988.
Yankee Doodle always says the past is just a start. Tomorrow will bring songs to you that come straight from the heart.
All animatronics were quickly moved to Splash. While all of the animals remained nearly unchanged, it is rumored that both Sam and Ollie were reskinned and transformed into the Brier Fox and Brier Rabbit animatronics. Aside from America Sings, another Disney well-known would be reused in Splash Mountain. Rufus the Bear, who would always be found sleeping at the entrance to Bear Country, was moved to the Slip and Falls portion of the ride. The characters were finally placed in their new homes. The Swamp Boys, made up of the Gator Trio, a harmonica-playing raccoon, and singing frogs, were placed in various parts of Doodah Landing. The Boo Hill Boys, who initially sang the end of Billy the Kid, would now be perched on a branch overhead the guest as they traveled up the final lift hill. The Fox and Rabbit singing I've Been Working on the Railroad was transformed into Brier Rabbit just before the drop down to the laughing place. Saddle-Sore Swanson, along with the goose in the cage from the gay 90s, were placed in the laughing place scene along with 2 singing storks. And, who could forget,
Goes a weasel!
as promised, Uncle Remus was not incorporated into the show. However, quotes of his could be found throughout the ride's queue. Each of the 105 animatronic figures took over 80 hours to rewire, giving them 45 seconds of function before re-looping the sequence from the beginning. voice actors could now be brought in to give the characters a new life. Veteran Rabbit voice actor Jess Harnell, who previously voiced Roger Rabbit and Wacko from the Animaniacs, was brought in for the voices of Brier Rabbit, Mr. Bluebird, and the vultures in the drop sequence. J.D. Hall was to play Brier Fox, and Nick Stewart reprised his role as Brier Bear. Mother Possum and Mother Rabbit were to be voiced by B.J. Ward, who had previously worked on several Disney attractions, one being Sarah in the Carousel of Progress.
Hours to do the wash. Imagine, it used to take 2 days.
Thurl Ravenscroft, famously known for his work on the Haunted Mansion, Pirates, and the Disneyland Railroad, would voice the singing bullfrogs. For the finale, Imagineers built one of the largest animatronic props ever constructed, the Zippity Lady Showboat, which stood 30 feet high and 50 feet wide. This would hold a number of audio-animatronic animals singing Zippity-Doo-Dah just after guests descended into the Briar Patch. Behind one of the foxes would be a poster which read, "Playbill, Captain Andy presents Song of the South in 3 acts," as a nod to Song of the South's 3 animated sequences. With the construction now complete, and an opening date of October growing closer, executives began testing the ride. Splash Mountain lived up to its name. Rather than a light spray of water, riders were getting soaked. So much so that the opening date had to be pushed back. The boats needed to be lighter. So instead of asking Hopkins to redesign them, Tony Baxter decided, let's do it ourselves. Miniatures were built, tested, and retested until they were confident they had their design. The 6-person logs were just about perfect, with enough splash for a hot summer day, and yet not too much for the colder off-season. 9 months later, one of the longest delayed Disney ride openings of the time, Splash Mountain would be nearly ready for its first guests. 3 drops. $103 animatronics, a 47-degree slope, nearly 10 minutes in length. Splash Mountain was a thrill ride, a dark ride, and a log flume all in one. And guests were anxious to finally see what Disney's newest mountain had in store. Due to the amount of media coverage, expectations were high.
But the only way out is a long way down.
Something is happening at McDonald's. Buy a Coca-Cola. Peel the sticker. And play Splash for Cash. You could win $25,000 instantly.
To Disneyland to experience Splash Mountain. So now what? Hurry down and play the Scrabble game at McDonald's.
I won! We are just minutes away from a feat some have compared with Alan Shepard's first ride into space or Neil Armstrong's walk on the moon. We're about to see Daredevil consultant and world-renowned ride tester Ernest P. Worrell take the maiden voyage on Disneyland's newest attraction, Splash Mountain.
Splash!
On July 17th, 1989, Splash Mountain officially opened. Starting at the Harbor Galley, a line began to form while the ribbon-cutting ceremony commenced. A show featuring Mickey Mouse, Michael Eisner, Ernest, and of course the Brier characters was taking place. Rather than a red ribbon, a giant pump was placed in front of the mountain, and at 12:10, the guests of honor threw the switch.
I didn't know what to expect. Just gonna fall right into it. I knew it. I was just screaming. I was just like, ah! It's so fast and so...
Left my heart up at the top of the pig. It was great.
I loved it.
Can't beat it.
Splash Mountain was a success. Randy Lewis of the LA Times wrote, "The gut-wrenching excitement isn't likely to lose impact upon repeat exposure. One key test of a great ride." Eisner immediately began the plans to add Splash to other Disney parks, and in 1991, construction began at both Magic Kingdom and Tokyo Disneyland. A fourth Splash Mountain was in the works to be constructed at Euro Disneyland, but due to the colder weather, the idea was ultimately shelved. During the construction at Magic Kingdom, a total reconfiguration of Frontierland was underway, tearing down the old train station and moving it to be used as a visual buffer. This would be the first time the Magic Kingdom train would stop running, as part of the track was moved and elevated, allowing guests to walk under them. Over in Tokyo, Splash Mountain would not fit in with the rest of the park, so a Critter Country was constructed in its honor. It is important to note that Japanese culture was not comfortable with the single-row seating as done at Disneyland Splash, and so new logs were created, seating guests side by side. This allowed for 2,285 riders per hour, unlike Disneyland's 1,500, and so the new design was added to Magic Kingdom to assist with the massive crowds that would surely be seen during the summer months. Different music styles were integrated into each version. Disneyland Splash would feature a jazzy, big band sound to match New Orleans Square, whereas Magic Kingdom and Tokyo Disneyland would present the songs with a more Western feel. One key difference the Magic Kingdom had over Disneyland's Splash Mountain was the use of Brier Frog, who would tell the guests the story of Brier Rabbit in an Uncle Remus-like fashion. Famously known as Uncle Phil on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, actor James Avery was brought in to voice the parts of both Brier Frog and Brier Bear.
Folks hereabouts say Brier Rabbit's leaving home. I say he's heading for trouble.
On October 1st, 1992, Tokyo Disneyland opened Splash Mountain, followed by Magic Kingdom, who opened theirs the following day. Averaging wait times of up to 2 hours, families waited patiently in the sun to see what lurked inside of Chickapin Hill. The beautiful thing about Splash Mountain was that it had a little something for everyone. Small children could experience the whimsical story of Brier Rabbit for the first time. Thrill seekers could have a front row seat of Disney's tallest drop. And those looking to cool off on a hot day walked away completely soaked.
But it combines a lot of the things that are in some of the best rides that I like at Disneyland, like the Pirates of the Caribbean, the Matterhorn, and Space Mountain, kind of all in one.
While Disneyland and Magic Kingdom expanded, and more exciting rides appeared on the map, one would think Splash Mountain lines would dwindle throughout the years. Splash Mountain maintained its high wait times, especially during the summer months, and park guests couldn't get enough of it. To help with the crowds, in 1999, Disneyland installed their newest invention, the Fast Pass. This revolutionized the theme park world, and guests were now given the opportunity to receive a free reservation time for the ride of their choosing. Thrill rides like Indiana Jones, Space, and Splash Mountain typically booked up by lunchtime, and for the next 30 years, Splash Mountain would remain a favorite among park guests. And then, just when we all felt comfortable, when we were all at our happiest, in 2019, the global pandemic evolved from a 2-week closure to a much longer period of uncertainty, leading to several major political events. Petitions were created on change.org stating, Retheme Splash Mountain. On June 25th, 2020, Disney came out and announced that Splash Mountain would be changed to a Princess and the Frog themed attraction.
With over 20,000 people signing an online petition, Splash Mountain will be rethemed to star characters from The Princess and the Frog, which features Disney's first black princess.
Concept art was immediately released. The layout showed a very obvious change to Chickapin Hill, where Mama Odie's house would now reside. Tiana in her blue dress and Louis with his trumpet stood near the entrance of the second lift hill, welcoming guests as they made their ascent. Although fans of the original mountain were unhappy with this announcement, the concept art showed promise in a high-quality retheme. D23, which takes place every other year in Anaheim, California, is a massive, multi-day event where fans are given the chance to preview upcoming projects Disney has in store for the company. A walkthrough section titled The Wonderful World of Dreams gave us the chance to see concept art, models, sculptures, and animations of all the changes coming to the Disney parks. This was the world's first opportunity to see the now named Tiana's Bayou Adventure, which was noticeably different from the original concept art. A water tower now stood front and center, with a sign which read Tiana's Foods. The exterior lacked any characters from the movie, and Mama Odie's tree was now completely gone. Grass was replaced with new foliage, and many began calling the ride Broccoli Mountain. New petitions surfaced in an attempt to stop the overhaul, and groups like Save Splash Mountain and Splash Mountain Forever began forming on social media, turning this into one of Disney's most controversial ride closures. On January 22nd, 2023, Magic Kingdom fans rode through the Brier Patch one last time, saying their final goodbyes to Brier Rabbit, Brier Fox, and Brier Bear. Disneyland followed behind, making their final day of operation May 30th. Guests waited up to 4 hours in standby, and to make sure the park could close on time, the single rider line had to be cut off by 6 p.m. Disneyland guests gathered in front of Chickapin Hill in a send-off unlike any other. It was that night we said goodbye to Splash Mountain. On June 28, 2024, Tiana's Bayou Adventure opened at Magic Kingdom, with new songs, new stories, and some of the most incredible animatronics Disney has ever released. Splash Mountain is gone, and some will ask why so many people are upset by this. It is just a ride, right? When I began working on this project, Splash Mountain was still open and running, so the reality of its closure really hadn't hit yet. Sure, it is just a defunct Disney ride, but after saying my goodbyes, I understood I was saying goodbye to so much more. Splash Mountain represented a time in Disney before on-ride screens and before social media. The Imagineers who worked on this created it because they wanted to. There was no parks panel, there were no hashtags. There was just a team who wanted to create something truly fun and unique from the ground up. Imagineers put their hearts, their souls, and their childhoods into something magical. I understand the controversy surrounding the film, and I understand why it hurt so many people. After all, we do need to keep moving forward. But that doesn't mean we can't hold on to the joy we once felt while seeing our pictures at the end. When it comes to Splash Mountain, it wasn't just a log flume. It was friends laughing together. It was a child facing their fears. It was a song you couldn't get out of your head. It was memories that will live on in our hearts forever, and that is something that can never be taken away from us. So I'll leave you with this. I've had enough of this old briar patch. I think an adventure's about to hatch. I'm moving on, say goodbye to me. Down at the laughing place is where I'll be.
Just yell the name of this mountain with me. We'll open the steepest, wettest, most splash-tacular place in the whole world! 1, 2, 3, Splash Mountain! Wonderful, wonderful
Cool house, yes?